Today is Tuesday, November 16th, and this is William Michael of the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. Before I get started with the topic I'd like to discuss, I'd just like to say that I'm actually recording in my home office in the evening, which I normally don't do, and I've got a full house of kids, and it's just around dinner time, so I apologize in advance if there's any distracting background noise during this talk. So the background noise just may be a little different than normal, but it's just because I'm recording in the house tonight. The topic I'd like to discuss was raised by a friend I've been in contact with, and it's about the modern Catholic schools. And when I criticize modern Catholic education, there are a number of assumptions in my criticism that I don't always address, because normally I'm working to promote the restoration of classical Catholic education within the context of modern society, and I'm usually simply comparing the modern school curriculum to the classical liberal arts curriculum, along with classical philosophy and Catholic theology. But there are other issues that need to be addressed when we consider whether or not modern Catholic schooling is effective or not. And I'd like to talk about one of those issues in a brief talk tonight, because I think it changes the perspective of this discussion and raises or raises attention with regard to raises awareness of what we should consider the pressing problem that we face as Catholics. And I'm going to share some statistics to try and present this issue clearly. If you go on the internet and Google CARA Church Statistics, CARA Church Statistics, just Google that and you'll find a document that's hosted by Georgetown University that contains a bunch of church statistics. These are statistics collected for and by the church that tell us what's going on in the Catholic Church in America. And it has data from 1970 through 2020. The statistics suggest a number of problems that modern school leaders don't seem to be aware of, or they don't consider themselves to be responsible for. And I'd like to point out some of these problems. If you were to look at those statistics, and I'll just share some of the relevant points with you, and you can check the statistics yourself to see whether what I say is true or not. To get started, in 2020, and I want you just to think about these things. In 2020, half the number of infants were baptized in the Catholic Church as were baptized in 1970. Let me repeat that. In 2020, half the number of children, infants, were baptized in the Catholic Church as there were in 1970. Now we can say, well, maybe that was influenced by COVID. Maybe the number of baptisms were affected by COVID. I don't know. But the fact is, half the children were baptized in 2020 as were baptized in 1970. Regardless of what the cause actually was, there were, I think, 150,000 fewer baptisms in 2020 than there were in 2015. And there were over 100,000 fewer baptisms in 2015 than there were in 2010. And there were probably 100,000 fewer in 2010 than there were in 2005. So no matter what someone says to try and excuse away the number in 2020, there has been a decline in the number of baptisms since 2005. From over 900,000 baptisms in America down into the 800,000s, down into the 600,000s, and then in 2020 down to 545,000. So no matter what the explanation is for why there were so few baptisms in 2020, it's the fact. We'll see if they increase now that we're out of this COVID craziness. Maybe they'll increase in coming years. We'll see. But the reality is that the numbers were over 1 million baptisms in 1970 and down to around 545,000 in 2020. So we have to acknowledge the reality that Catholicism is diminishing in America. Catholicism is diminishing in America, and this is not only reflected in the number of baptisms, this is also reflected in the number of children enrolled in Catholic schools. The same ratio exists there. About half the number of children are currently attending Catholic schools as there were in the 1960s. Half the number of children in Catholic schools, even though the population has multiplied greatly. The number of Catholic students decreasing, the population is increasing. So not only is the number smaller absolutely in comparison with 50 years ago, the number relative to the population is even more concerning. Much, much less of American society is being influenced by Catholic education. And you can throw something in like homeschooling and talk about Catholic homeschooling, but the numbers are nowhere near these numbers. It's not like all the Catholic children are simply being homeschooled. That's false. So we have to acknowledge the first problem, that Catholicism in America, before we get into this talk about education, we have to acknowledge that Catholicism is diminishing in America. Significantly diminishing. Half the number of infants were baptized in 2020 than were in 1970. And again, even if COVID was responsible for that, I'll grant that. If that's an objection, I'll grant that objection. That's reasonable and possible. I don't know that it's true, but it's possible. But there are still suggestions that there are problems because the previous years of statistics still show decline from the 900,000s to 800,000s to 600,000s to 500,000 in 2020. So I don't think that objection is really going to hold up because there is a decline that's been in the works for the past 15 to 20 years. So that's problem number one. Catholicism is diminishing in America. Here's the second problem. And this I think is more concerning. If we look from the years, let me think, 2000 and, let's see, this is 2021, so a high school senior today would be born in, let's say, 2003. And so from 2003 to, say, 2017, that would be the years in which children currently in Catholic schools were baptized in the church. Let me restate that because I know that I spoke that unclearly. If we consider children currently in Catholic schools from ages 18 down to around 5, we have a gap of 13 years. The children at the lower end, the 5-year-olds, would have been baptized in, let's say, 2016. And the seniors would have been baptized in 2003, 2002. So from 2003 to 2016, my numbers may be slightly off. This is off the top of my head. But from that window, from, let's say, 2003 or 4 to 2016, a 12-year window. If we look at the statistics for baptisms during that time span and add them all up, we'll find that there were about 11 million children baptized in the Catholic Church, infants. 11 million infants baptized in the Catholic Church in America. Let me repeat that. Between 2004 and 2016-17, the exact years don't matter. Over a 12-year span, there were about 11 million infants baptized in the Catholic Church in America. So keep that number in mind, 11 million. Now, if we were to estimate the number of Catholic children in Catholic schools today, what do you think that number would be? The number is around 2 million. Let me repeat those numbers. From 2004 or so to 2016 or so, 11 million infants were baptized in the Catholic Church. Today, of those 11 million infants, 2 million of them are being educated in a Catholic school. 2 of the 11 million baptized infants are being educated today in a Catholic school. The reason why that's significant is because what we often do when we discuss Catholic schools is we evaluate the Catholic schools relative to the students in the Catholic schools. But when we do that, we ignore the 8 to 9 million children who are not in the Catholic schools. What I believe we need to do, if we're going to be responsible, is evaluate whether or not the current arrangement for Catholic education is serving the baptized children in the Catholic Church? That's a very different question. Because the plan for the education of Catholic children should be accountable to all of the Catholic children, not just to less than 20% of them. So when we look at the 2 million children who are in Catholic schools, and we look at their academic achievement, we look at their SAT scores, their college admission rates, and all these academic statistics, and remember, all of these numbers only relate to 2 of the 11 million baptized infants that have been in the Catholic Church. And I believe that this problem is being overlooked, that the arrangement of Catholic schools and the plan for Catholic education is ignoring 8 to 9 million of the 11 million baptized infants in the Catholic Church. The current plan for Catholic education doesn't serve the Catholic population. The current plan for Catholic education is not serving the Catholic population. And yet when we talk about the Catholic schools, we just look at the numbers and the achievements of the kids who happen to be in those schools without asking, what about the other kids? What about the 80 to 90%? Let's say 80 to 85% of baptized Catholic children who aren't in the Catholic schools. The first question we have to ask is, why aren't they in the Catholic schools? Why aren't they in the Catholic schools? Is it because they can't afford to attend Catholic schools? If that's the case, that's a grievous reality. And to sit there with Catholic schools operating as these little private institutions, as if that's what the demand looks like, we can just see that there's a disconnect between what the schools are doing, how the schools are organized, what the plan is for schooling Catholic children, and what the actual population of Catholic children needs. I have 10 children of my own. Imagine if I came home from work and let's say I stopped at the store, and I picked up some food and came home with some food, and I had enough food for 2 of my 10 children. And I sat 2 of my children down, and I handed out the food that I had picked up at the store, and they sat at the table and ate the food. And then when they got done eating the food, we checked their weight on the scale, we checked their height, we checked their vital signs, we checked their body fat, wrote down all the statistics, and we said, look, the family diet's doing great. The kids' numbers look great. They're healthy, they're gaining weight, all of their vital signs look good. The family diet looks great. Wouldn't I be accountable to the other 8 children who had no food? Would the quality of my provision, would the family diet be fairly evaluated by focusing only on the children that I actually fed? Or would all 10 of the children have to be evaluated and my provision judged relative to the 10, not to the 2? This is my argument against the current plan for the education of Catholic children. It's providing for 2 of 11 children. Now, if the reason why children can't or don't attend Catholic schools is the cost, then this plan is simply not sustainable. It's not addressing the need. If we can't afford to educate 11 million children, but we can only afford to educate 2 million children and make them pay for that education, we don't have a sustainable plan for education. Now, if what we're doing is the only possible option, then that'd be all we could say. We could say we're doing everything we can. This is the only possible option, and we can only serve 2 million. We can't help the other 9 million. There's just nothing we can do. There's no other option. But what doesn't make sense is how can Khan Academy, a secular educational company, how can they figure out how to make free online education available? Why can they figure it out? Why can they come up with a plan to provide free online courses based on their secular worldview? They talk about things like social justice. They talk about things like equal opportunity. And they come up with a solution where they provide a complete K-12 curriculum program and beyond. And they offer it to children for free. And yet the Catholic community leaves 8 to 9 million of its baptized children with no provision. How can that be? Why can the world find a solution, but Catholics cannot? It doesn't make any sense. We're told that there are 70 million Catholics in America. Let's just think about this. We're told that there are approximately 70 million Catholics in America. There are 2 million who need a Catholic education. 70 million Catholics in America. That's what the statistics tell us. And 2 million children, ages 5 to 18, need a Catholic education. Why can the 70 million Catholics not find a way to provide for the education of the 2 million Catholics? It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. Why can non-Christian secular people come up with solutions and Catholics can't? Does it make sense for us to send our children to them to use their solutions? Why do we do that? Why are we sending our Catholic children to the non-Catholics to make use of their solutions? It makes no sense. It makes no sense why we're doing that. Let's go a little deeper here. In the 1880s, when the Baltimore Council gathered in a number of different meetings, I think they're called separate councils. I think there were 3 Baltimore councils. That's irrelevant. What's relevant is that the Baltimore Council gathered in the late 1800s, in the 1880s. And they were concerned, the bishops of the United States of America were concerned that Catholic children were being pressured in the 1880s. Catholic children were being pressured to attend the American public schools. And this was a concern because the American Catholic schools were influenced by Protestant ideas. They were largely Protestant. The bishops were concerned that the Catholic children didn't have access to a Catholic education. And because they didn't have access to a Catholic education, many of them were being pressured to attend the Protestant-influenced public schools in America, which were anti-Catholic. If you'd like to see how anti-Catholic the American public schools were, I have another Google search for you to try. Search the name Thomas Nast, N-A-S-T. Thomas Nast cartoons. And you should find cartoons from the 1880s from Harper's Bazaar, which was the largest periodical in America. And if you scroll through the images, you'll see educational cartoons that are anti-Catholic. One of them that I remember the name of was called something like the American Ganges, G-A-N-G-E-S, the river. Do some Google searching and let me know what you find. The public schools in the 1880s were anti-Catholic, Protestant-influenced schools, and the bishops didn't want the Catholic children in those schools. So the bishops made it mandatory for Catholic parishes to provide schools for Catholic children. Mandatory that the Catholic parishes provide schools for the Catholic children, so that the Catholic children wouldn't be subjected to the Protestant influence in the American public schools. Now let's fast forward 140 years to 2020. And we have a similar situation. We have Catholic students being pressured to attend public schools. But consider how much different the present situation is. The modern public schools available today are not patriotic, democratic American schools under the influence of some Protestant Christian teaching. When we send Catholic children to the public schools today, we're not sending them into a place where they might read from the King James Bible or have a story in their reading book that praises a certain Protestant from history. In 2020, if a Catholic child needs to go to the public school, he's being sent to a secular, atheist school where the teachers are not even Christians, schools that are filled with immorality, with drugs, with violence, with all kinds of moral craziness, from gender confusion to homosexuality, being taught as normal in the schools. Abortion, contraception, as I said, drugs. The Catholic children today are being sent to public schools that aren't even Christian. They're not in danger of learning to trust in the Bible only. They're not in danger of being told that the Pope isn't really the supreme head of the Christian church on earth. They're not in danger of being told that there are only two sacraments. They're in danger of being told that they may not even be the gender that they think they are, or that they may be homosexuals if they're not zealous for marriage. Where is the concern that these children have Catholic schools? Where is the concern of the bishops of the Council of Baltimore that the children in 2020 and 2021 have Catholic schools, have access to Catholic education? Where is that concern? And I'm not just blaming bishops. Where is that concern among priests? Where is that concern among monks or nuns? I know there aren't many. But where is that concern among the religious? Where is that concern among the Catholic laity? Where is the concern that children baptized into the Catholic Church have access to a Catholic education? If we were to take a ride into an Amish community, we would find that the Amish people provide for the education of Amish children. They don't do what the public schools do because they can't afford a massive tax-funded mega school. They have small local schoolhouses like they did in the old days, and you can make fun of them all you want, but the difference is the Amish provide for the education of their Amish children. They find ways to satisfy modern government regulations. Our government works with them. They develop their own sustainable schoolhouses that serve their own children. The Amish people provide for the education of their children. If you go and look among Protestants, you'll often find Protestant churches one of the first things that they do is organize their own schools. You'll find small Protestant schools all over the place. Maybe they meet in the Sunday school classrooms at the church. And they just have a couple kids per grade or a couple teachers. It's sort of an expanded Sunday school program that provides for the whole education. I was a member of a small Reformed Baptist church in New Jersey. Wasn't a very large church, but half the church facility was dedicated to a Christian school. And the Christian school was the apostolate of the church community. The whole church was involved in the life of the school. You couldn't imagine the church community not providing a school for the children in the church and for children in neighboring Protestant churches. But that the church would have a school was a no-brainer. What are we going to do? Talk about the Great Commission and not even evangelize and teach our own children? In almost every religious community, Jewish, Muslim, Protestant, Amish, the education of the children according to their beliefs and culture is one of the first priorities of their communities. But when we move to the Catholic Church, 11 million children with education provided for 2 million. In a church with 70 million members. Doesn't make any sense. Again, as I said, if we were doing all that we could, we were turning over every stone we could turn over, and there was just no way to provide a solution, that would be that. But as I said, the Amish can find a way to educate their children. Khan Academy can find a way to provide free education for children, a secular curriculum that I would never recommend to Catholic children. But why can they find a way and Catholics can't? It makes no sense. Over the past 20 to 30 years now, 20 to 30 years, technology has been developing to allow for remote learning. Why are we not pursuing this as an option for Catholic education? Why is the option for Catholics pay private school tuition or go to the public school? Why is that the choice that needs to be made? Why are Catholic children going to local Protestant Christian schools? Why is the option private school or non-Catholic school? It makes no sense. This technology has been developing for 20 years now. In the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, I've managed to make free education available within 10 years out of my own resources. This is not difficult work. This is not confusing work. I've been able to do this by myself with almost no resources to work with. This work isn't expensive. It's not complicated. It's not difficult. I offer children access to the same educational software that's used in the public schools and at colleges and universities all over the world. The software is free. Why is there not a Catholic educational program available for children to use remotely for free? It makes absolutely no sense. We could easily make Catholic education available to all Catholic children, all 11 million of them, available at no cost. And if there were costs, they could easily be raised among the 70 million members that the Church claims to have. There's no excuse, there's no explanation for why we simply ignore 8 to 9 million of the 11 million children baptized into the Church. There's no explanation for it. These things are not difficult to arrange. It's not expensive to provide. The technology has developed in front of us over the past 20 years. And for some reason, are we so spiritual that we can only serve 2,000 or 2 million of 11 million children? That doesn't seem to be very spiritual. Is it because we're so responsible that education can only be provided in a private school arrangement? Well, what about the 8 to 9 million children who aren't in that environment? The current plan for Catholic education is not sustainable. It's not taking responsibility for the number of children in need of Catholic education. And I think that Catholic schools have to be accountable to the service that they provide for all 11 million of the children baptized into the Church, not just for the 2 million who have the opportunity to attend those schools. And again, I gave the illustration of me feeding 2 of my children and asking that my provision be evaluated by measuring those 2 children and ignoring my other 8 children who weren't fed. Now, this is not idle complaining. As I said, within 13 years, 10 of which I didn't even work on this program because I was actually managing a school on the ground. I've been able to develop and provide free access to Catholic education online. I don't understand why the Catholic Church at large can't do this. I've done it with my own resources, and I'm a poor Christian school teacher. There's no explanation for why the Church cannot provide free Catholic education to every Catholic child. Sure, leave the private schools as they are. Allow that to be an option. That's fine. No one has a right to a private school education. But for the children who can't have the private school education, why does the alternative have to be nothing? That makes no sense. I can say all Catholic children are welcome to study in my program for free. And they are. But I don't understand why this seems to make sense only to me. If you want to see what it looks like, go on the website and look. Free Catholic education I'm a classicist. I promote classical education. But even I can put modern courses on the site and make them available for free. I don't understand why Catholic bishops, Catholic priests, Catholic parishes, Catholic lay men and women have this situation in Catholic education that they have. I cannot understand it. And so, to get back to the original topic, when we talk about Catholic education and modern Catholic education, before we even get into discussions about classical education, the classical liberal arts, modern schools, how are things going, there's a giant elephant in the room that we have to deal with. And it's the 8 to 9 million baptized Catholic children that have no Catholic education. So before anyone criticizes my opinions about education, I ask you to consider whether your plan has an answer for the 8 million children not in the Catholic schools. That's the question.